live? Am I here?
I hear you.
Where am I? I've materialized. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Drunkens and Dragons, the YouTube show where there's drunkens and there are dragons, and there's also John Harper, who is a gentleman who may or may not require introduction, but I'm going to give one anyway. It's my first interview show. I don't really know how to talk to other people, but John was kind enough to show up and put up with the mania for at least a few minutes while we pick his brain about being awesome. So for those of you who don't know, for one thing, get with the program, get out from under that rock. So I have cool pictures. Now, it's hard to summarize John's achievements, actually, so I had to do my homework like a true stalker. And this guy has been doing it for 20 years plus with just numerous things. So I'm not even going to try to introduce all of it, but definitely check out Thought Lords of Mars and definitely go out there, look the guy up and see what's going on. Now, recently, because recency bias is something we all suffer from in this life, but Blades in the Dark is John's latest creation, and I don't say I have the stats to back it up, but seems to me like the biggest and the stickiest creation that he's done so far. Not only making like a very burly feeling heavy book that you could probably kill somebody with. There's a lot of weight right here, but also teaming up with Evil Hat and all of their sort of capability, which is a worldwide capability. So it just gave him a bunch more reach. And I think a bunch of people are having fun with the game, myself included. And that is how we came to today. So John, thanks a lot for showing up, man.
It's great to be here. Yeah, thanks. I love to talk about games, and not just my games, but that's nice too. So I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Okay, it'll be like 45 minutes of like an Oscar reception speech. You just like, thank you. Yes, thank you. Okay, so before we deem you acceptable to be interviewed, we have to subject you to the bell sound from beyond. No, we have to subject you to a multiple choice quiz. It's going to be brutal. Are you ready?
I need to get ready.
Oh, yeah. Hey, good point.
All right. I am now ready.
Okay. Man, a man after my own heart, if I had one. Okay. So first of all, let me make sure. Okay, there we go. I'm in quiz mode. First question. What was your first Boy Scout badge?
Oh, geez.
Was it A, Mech Warrior, B, nuclear physics, or C, cow?
I would have to say, I think this is almost true. Mech Warrior.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think I played the first Mech Warrior video game around the time when I was getting out of Boy Scouts, so that may be true.
Nice. You just like tape some wooden blocks to your feet and you can reach the weapon controls.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay. Not bad. Not bad. I'm going to have to give you a ding on that one. Question 2. Biggest badass. Is it Lieutenant Ellen Ripley, Sarah Connor, or Carrie?
Oh.
This one's tough.
That is so tough. Man.
And you will be held to these answers in future interactions.
I mean, I should be. This is an important question.
Yeah, this really matters. Like, this has been on my mind lately because I was so disappointed and pissed off after watching Wonder Woman.
Oh, no.
That I was like, from my childhood, I know some badass women in movies, and this Wonder Woman shit is garbage. So I've been trying to choose between these three myself. So I'm going to put it to you now.
Well, so I might have to cheat a little. I assume cheating is okay on Drunkens and Dragons.
Cheating is encouraged.
Yeah. So normally I would probably say Ripley, because Ripley, come on, obviously. However, if we throw into the mix with Sarah Connor, both the film Sarah Connor and the TV show Sarah Connor, which is Lena Headey, I think that tips the scale for her. So I'm gonna say Sarah Connor, both the films and the TV series.
Okay, there we have an answer. Sarah Connor it is. I'm going to rule in favor. That's another ding.
All right.
She's the only one of these three with a scene doing pull-ups.
Yes, that is true. In both forms, actually. They recreate that scene just for the show.
Oh, really? Like on a bed frame?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's kick-ass. Okay, good answer. Good answer. All right.
Yeah.
Now here comes the final round.
All right.
You must choose your deepest fear. Is it 1, Azathoth, the blind idiot god in the outer universe? Is it 2, Dean Stockwell? And you can choose Dean Stockwell in any of his roles if you want.
All right.
Or is it 3, Fractal Broccoli?
Wow. I did not expect that. Or is it this question? Maybe is my deepest fear. Really, a meta answer. I'm going to go with the timely answer here. These are all good. They're all very frightening. But I'm going to go with Dean Stockwell.
Hey, correct answer.
I am rewatching. My girlfriend and I were watching Battlestar Galactica, and Brother Cavill, Dean Stockwell, is amazing. And he's a scary dude.
Yeah, I think I know they're sort of semi-personal questions, but in that case, there's actually a right answer.
Yes,
and it's Dean Stockwell.
I have to agree with you on that one. Yeah, he's pretty much always the right answer for any given question.
Whether he's a kitschy hologram or a treacherous doctor, I'm scared. Okay, great. So now that we got that out of the way, everyone can silently or openly judge you based on your answers.
Yeah, I hope
hopefully we have a deeper understanding of each other.
I hope I passed. That was a rough one.
Okay, so I didn't want to sort of frame the interview with you today, particularly about blades. You know, like this mechanic is really cool and that mechanic's really cool. And I've actually been enjoying sort of reading the book in a nonlinear order. And like, there's a lot of things to talk about with blades. Yeah. But since I don't really know how to conduct interviews in proper fashion, I just have to go with complete selfish mode. So for me, as a writer and an RPG creator like you, I just wanted to ask you some questions about that aspect, about the sort of the more creative aspect. Now that you're, I mean, not necessarily looking back, but definitely sitting on a pile of achievements, right? I mean, in my mind, you're someone worth asking questions of. So as the Taoists would say, even an oak tree rises from an acorn. So I'm just curious, what was your acorn? When did you sort of germinate into actually just writing full time and just doing this?
Yeah, good question. It like most things, I think, in life, it was a iterative process. It didn't just start one day. It's hard to pinpoint the start. I typically have an answer to when it kind of really started, but when I was little, I have 10 or 9 or something around there. My friend ran Gamma World for me, and I fell in love with role playing and photocopied this stuff from his book and took it back to my town and ran it for the kids in my cul-de-sac and just became obsessed with role playing. Kind of just before the curve of the Satanic Panic and that stuff that started to happen. So I got to kind of recruit a bunch of kids into this hobby before I had any stigma, before it was known really, and across social lines too in our town there, like the people who turned out to be nerds and jocks and student government people and band people and whatever, like that hadn't really happened yet. And so we created these friendships and these connections through gaming that lasted through all of our lives, pretty much, cutting across those lines. And that really made me love gaming, because it was such a big success right out of the gate, you know.
Right.
I wasn't toiling away like, oh, I wish I could find people to play with, and the typical stories that you hear from gamers. I got really lucky, and I just had a great group of people. And so from the very beginning, we were playing Marvel superheroes and D6 Star Wars and that stuff. And the Marvel superheroes in particular, and D6, were super hackable. And so we all kind of started, me as sort of the main GM type in the group, but we all started writing stuff. We were like, oh, let's use this Marvel superheroes table, results table thing, but we'll be like more cosmic style. Like we'll be bounty hunters out in space, like
Right.
X-Men. When the X-Men go to space, we'll do that kind of stuff. Or we'll hack D6 to do kind of a road warrior kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
And so was just part of play to us back then. It wasn't so much being a game designer exactly. It was more like GMing. You know, you would write some stuff, you'd make some rules, you'd make some maps, and then bring them to the table and people would play it. And for a long time, we shifted fully into that mode, like all through the end of high school and early into college. We were pretty much just playing homebrew stuff, really. Hacks of other games, but our own creations. And it wasn't until 94, 93, 94, my like in college time, where I got connected to some publishers. We were playing Talislanta a lot. I got to know the Talislanta creator through Usenet back then.
Man, that's a dusty chestnut.
Various game boards, in the like 93, 92 era. And they were cool. Like they were fun to hang out with and chat with, and were very generous with their time and with their insights and design stuff. And Wizards of the Coast was just starting. I just moved to Seattle in 93. And so I got to know Peter and some of those guys. And it was just this whole atmosphere carrying on from our like teen years of a group of people coming together for a common purpose to do a thing, except these guys were publishers. They weren't just gamers. I don't mean just, you know what I mean? They were publishers in addition to being gamers. And so we had access, and I could email Robin Laws and talk to him about stuff, and John Tweed and those guys. And that whole atmosphere was very open and very accepting of new people, because the community was really tiny back then.
Right.
So that like homebrew mentality, being a GM and a game hacker, game designer, transitioned very easily into, hey, let's write stuff for Talislanta. Wizards is publishing it, and I know those guys. Rob Hainso, who did 4th edition D&D, was working on Talislanta stuff back then with me, and Robin Laws came in to do a version of Talislanta. So this like hobby thing that we were doing started to transition into, these are going to be published. These are going to be like actual games.
Yeah.
And and this is key too, we started play testing their games. So we were play testing Everway, and we were play testing Feng Shui, and that was a real important step to step into that community as not just trying to shill your own stuff, but to come in and be like, hey, I'm a resource for you. I have game groups, you know, we can play your stuff. And that formed a connection, and that still happens to this day.
Absolutely. I think it's just cool that you were there with what are now sort of large trees of creative growth, but I don't think that cycle ever stops. I think there are seeds being planted right now that will be the next sort of set of trees. You know, it's just you happen to be there when a lot of names that are now recognizable were kind of growing up.
Yeah.
The early 90s were crazy. Once the terminals sort of started connecting, and the IRC chats and all that stuff started happening, that's also kind of when I got into video games. And by similar sort of social blundering of just kind of like, hey guys, I like playing Zork.
Yeah, exactly. That was an effective entree into that world. If you could talk about the stuff, you had interesting things to say, or you were social, or you were innovative, or whatever your thing was, you know.
So did you, when you were starting to get involved and sort of making these connections, did you know, like, oh man, I'm gonna do this? Or did you sort of look back 10 years later and be like, oh my God, I've written like 50,000 pages of stuff?
It went back and forth. So I dropped out of college and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I did, like 95, 96, around there, I did think about going to work for a game company or starting my own thing. Jared Sorensen around that time had a website, and he was publishing his games on his site. Jared Sorensen, who wrote Inspectors and Free Market with Luke Crane, and the Parsley games like Action Castle. That's Jared. And he, to me, was the pioneer. I don't know if he actually was, but he was the first person I saw who was saying, hey, I have access to the web. I know basic HTML. I don't need a publisher. I can just put my work up on my website and people can play my games. Yeah. There wasn't a good way to exchange money back then, really. But right around the same time, or a little bit later, Ron Edwards started to do like a shareware version of Sorcerer where he would send you the text file and you would mail him $5 if you liked it. So that was kind of the early pre-digital e-commerce thing.
That's when Cheap Ass Games was out as well.
Yes, exactly.
Which was my introduction to the little Ziploc bag that you would get for like $2 in the mail.
Yeah, and James is here too. Like Seattle was this weird hotbed back then. Everyone was like in the area, so that helped with connections too. But I saw Jared's work, and so my friend and I published on our site back then this game called Force 9, which is like Aliens essentially.
Yeah.
And it got a lot of attention. People played it. It went well. So we were like, okay, we can do this. Let's have a little game company. We started this little company. We did Force 9, and then we got the license to do Talislanta, and we did the big blue 4th edition Talislanta book, like the ultimate version of that game, because we're big fans. But we both had day jobs. We worked in tech back then. The .com boom was happening. You could get hired with no credentials of any kind. So I was a college dropout who had graphic design skills. So I became an art director at this company because why not? They were just throwing money around and hiring people. It didn't matter. So we had our day jobs, and then we spent a lot of our time on Talislanta. So we kind of straddled that line of being hobbyists and being publishers. And that was very fruitful. It got our names out there. It helped me get some exposure. John was sort of the back end guy. Jonathan Elliott, and I was sort of the game designer person. So the Talislanta fan base just gave us this big group hug, along with Feng Shui, because Robin had been working on Tal too. So Feng Shui was part of that, and Rob Hainso's work, and John Tynes here in Seattle as well. They were doing Unknown Armies, and he gave us all this mentorship and like brought us over to the Pagan House and like told us how to talk to distributors, and this is how much you should pay for art, and just like gave us the whole rundown of how to do that back then. Yeah. And back then it was print books, and sell them through retailers and at Gen Con. That was what you did. PDF sales were not a thing yet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is painfully recent if you really look at it.
Yeah.
It's really it seems like just like kind of what we've been doing, and like, yeah, sure. I mean, of course. But it's really like what, maybe 2-3 years old. I mean, as far as its like high acceleration rate, where the default to get the PDF,
the super visible, commonplace thing. I think Spirit of the Century. When was that? That was maybe 10 years ago. And they were really struggling to not struggling exactly, but they were pioneering this bits and mortar concept. Like, hey, if you buy our game at a retailer, you get the code from us for a free digital version. And that was a weird idea.
Even what is a PDF anyways? Is that like a picture of Yoda? What do I get?
Exactly. So this is turning into like history of gaming. It's kind of boring, but the point is there were several phases of like being a hobbyist, but as a designer first, like designing stuff for your group to play next week. That's what I started at when I was a little kid. And that carried forward through being a sort of traditional publisher. We did Talislanta, and we decided we didn't want to do that anymore, and we closed up shop. But I wanted to keep making games, so I kept my day job in graphic design and marketing, and then started Jared Sorensen-ing myself. Set up a website and started to create free RPGs, mini games and stuff. And I was hugely influenced by The Forge. IndieRPGs.com back then was the place for indie designers to get together and talk about gaming and support each other. So I got to meet.
I do like a lot of those like one-page style RPGs, right?
Yeah, and those all came out of knowing the innovators in that form: Emily Boss and Epidiah, Jason Morningstar, Vincent, Julie Ellingbo, Meg Baker. All those people. Again, it was like being put into another little tiny community. The gaming community had gotten really big, and then the indie community was this little group of people, and I got to know them and became friends with them. And it just so happened that those people became like really brilliant game designers who made all these tentpole games in our industry now.
Do you think that I mean, of everything that I've looked up about what you've done and everything, it's all feels very independent. Do you feel like that ever was a speed bump for you, like held you back, held you into? I know Adam Coble referred to it as sort of being marginalized in some ways. Did you ever feel that, or you're just like, no, this is where all the cool people hang out?
Yeah, it was no, not marginalization at all. I know what Adam means when he says that. I don't disagree with that, a certain form of that sentiment, but for me, no, it wasn't that at all. It was
awesome.
It was the opposite. It was a place where, while the bigger companies, White Wolf and Wizards primarily at the time, there were a few others, but they were doubling down on big physical book releases. Yep. The game store model was still in their sights. Pathfinder came along and bought into that same thing. And the indie crowd, in hindsight, it was smart. At the time, it was just a sort of short-term strategy, but we kind of looked at that space and we're like, like we don't, the rule of indie publishing back then, and I think it still holds true for the most part now, is that you own your IP. You're an indie guy if you own your IP. It doesn't matter if someone else publishes your work or whatever. You make all the decisions about the IP. Like Mike Mignola in comics, right? He owns Hellboy. Image and Dark Horse have published it, but he owns Hellboy. And we couldn't do that with the big companies, right? If we wanted to make stuff for Wizards or for White Wolf, whatever, they own it if you write for them. So we said, well, we want to retain ownership of our stuff. If Steven Spielberg reads Lady Blackbird and wants to make a movie of it, I want to get paid. That's probably not going to happen, but if it does, then it would be nice if I owned it instead of somebody else.
I can see it in my mind. I can see it. It would be awesome.
It would be super awesome, right? Maybe someday he'll read it, but yeah.
So I mean, to me,
the way around that at the time was to stay indie and switch to digital publishing rather than physical publishing as our main model. And that just through the accident of history, like that turned out to be the way that the industry went. So we were a little ahead by the time they course corrected over there. We had already been doing it for a while, but that was kind of lucky in a way.
Well, it's an almost sort of foregone but tough answer, which is kind of like, how do you get ahead in these newer markets, and how do you do this, and how do you look back, and what did you do? And this is, I hear the same thing talking to novelists a lot lately, which is their answers, just like yours just now, are all people answers.
Yeah.
And like, I love that you've got that great recall on all those writers and stuff. It's because you were just in there having fun with other writers. And I think that's kind of something that I wanted to, or that I enjoy hearing you say, and that it's a message that I would want to send to the, what is it? There's like 80 some people watching. So, hey, everybody, is like, it's a big part of the whole mess is the people component. It isn't just who made the cool games. There's lots of cool games, but there's a human element to it that I keep hearing more and more since my sort of little thing is starting to gain some momentum. I'm trying to look more toward mentors, and almost all of them are telling me the exact same answer, which is just sort of meet people, befriend them, sleep in their living rooms. Well, nobody told me to do that.
I did that too. It pays off. Yeah, I think you're completely right. And the reason I mention all these names, it's not so much name dropping. It's more that I want people to understand that it's easy to create this distance, where you see, I don't know, Vincent Baker, let's say, like he wrote Apocalypse World, and it's this huge thing, and it's turned into this little cottage industry of all these hacks and stuff.
Right.
And he's just a guy, and Meg is just a woman, and I'm just a guy, and we all got together at a certain time and befriended each other first and foremost. The fact that we were all game designers brought us together, but we created a community of friendship, really. And I've seen people struggle with this expectation that what they ought to do is like break into that group of friends, because that's where everything's happening. Right. So I'm not friends with Jason Morningstar and Vincent and John and Emily and Epi. And so in order to do the thing that they're doing, I need to become friends with them, which is cool. Like, we want friends, like that's fine. But there is a limit to that. Like there's a limit to the size that can sustain, and the time window too, kind of where like you sort of miss that first initial thing.
The time window, especially, that's a big one.
Yeah. It's just, and that's how it is with all friend groups, right? You can't go back there. It's already happened. So I always encourage people like, yeah, look at these other groups as a model, but people already that are doing this stuff, and you can do it again. Like you don't have to go back in time and try to get into this other group. You can just make your own thing, because that's what we did. That's what everybody does. Everyone has their, like, it's not a generation thing necessarily, but there is kind of a repeating pattern of this group coalesces and they go off and they do stuff. Same thing in the novel world, same thing in art, same thing in music.
That's an interesting sort of segue, I guess, to the next one that you answered a bunch of my questions all wrapped into one. But you described it as like a cottage industry of hackery around Apocalypse World, right? Which the word hack used to be a sort of a nasty word, but I think now in what we do, it's become a kind of an exciting word, and it's a fun word. And I think now maybe, I don't know if you realize it or not, or if you feel it, but what Blades kickstarted about 2 years ago, right? And so at this point, I mean, your Google Plus group is almost 20,000 people. Like a lot of people are definitely futzing around with it. So what do you think about hackery? If you see the next hack and it completely defies the pillars of joy that you found when you were designing, does it put a pit in your stomach, or is it more just like, oh my God, they made a diphtheria simulator out of the Blades engine, and it doesn't even use D6s, but they put my name on their PDF, and like, or is it just like slow motion thumbs up? Like, how does it feel being in that seat?
That's a really good question. It's complicated, but the simple answer is it feels great. And I think that all games, probably all art and music and literature, are hacks. Probably. It would be hard to make the case that any given piece was not, because that's just how we work, right? As creators, we absorb stuff, we recontextualize, we repurpose, and then we put our spin on it. But none of us invented the root stuff, right? That we're all working with materials that have come along. We're standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of innovation, but we're also just sharing human experience and finding common ground in all kinds of ways. So I think sometimes it's very good to call your work a hack. And I think all of us calling our stuff hacks help to turn that term into something that isn't so pejorative. But
it also just kind of says, hey, I kind of read this other thing and it kind of got my wheels turning, and I kind of cut it up.
Exactly.
Just being honest right now, it's a remix, and I'm just open with that. So here's my hack. And
that's the other thing that the indie guys were doing. In our books, we were putting all of our sort of ludography in there and saying like, hey, these are the games this game is based on. And Wizards was doing the same thing we were doing. They just weren't telling you the games they were basing their stuff on. And that's not a bad thing. Like, you're not required to tell those things. It just makes it so much more transparent, and it gives someone who's curious about design a place to go next, a place to research and look into. One of my favorite writers, Stephen Bruce, who I became friendly with through the same process of like, I'll just send this guy a letter in the mail and be like, I like your books, you're cool. And we started a correspondence and we became friends. And like, again, like, it's just that common thing over and over again of making friends. But Steve always says that you can see the bones, you can see the bones in the writing of someone's work. Like, you might as well be upfront about it. Like, you love Dumas. Yeah, we get it. Like, you're not going to fool us by being like, oh yeah, I just happen to be this very wordy, like, duelist fiction. Like, yeah, okay.
Never before has 2d6 been used.
Exactly.
Never before.
Exactly. So it had happened before. The Shadow of Yesterday, Clinton Dreisbach's game, and some other games. Sorcerer had been hacked a lot too. But Apocalypse World really put it out there, especially with Dungeon World coming so close behind. We that game group, Sage Latora, Paul Riddle, Shannon Riddle, myself, we had playtested Apocalypse World, and Sage and Adam were working on Dungeon World kind of not in parallel, but right behind it. So we got to have this great 1-2 punch of here's the game and here's a hack right behind it. And I think that really excited everybody who was into making games. I can do that too. It's not that crazy.
The funniest things that inspired this book section is in 13th Age. There's like 8 pages at the end of the book that basically list all movies. Like every good movie that you like is in that list. And like there's a ton of books, and it's just like, oh my God, this is weird. It's like the architect at the end of the Matrix.
Well, that even goes back to Gary's DMG. The Appendix N has like every fantasy author that he loves, and I basically, my love of fantasy fiction was by reading my way through that page in the DMG, Fritz Leiber especially. But I think I think as creators that it behooves us to do that, right? To be like, hey guys, like I've made this thing, but also look over here, look at this cool thing. It's not a zero-sum game, right? Where at some level we are going to stretch people's luxury products budget. And there is going to be a case where when I'm promoting your thing and telling everyone how cool it is, there's a chance that they're going to go and buy it and not buy my thing. That's possible. But for the most part, it's not that zero sum. We exist in this space where we're in it together, and any kind of exposure that we're trading back and forth or recommendations to each other's works is all good. It's all going to raise up all our boats, you know?
Well, and I think that that your track record gives those words gravity. You know, if you were sitting on a pile of crap with no success and nothing to show for it, then I would be like, I don't know about your technique, dude. It's not working out.
Exactly.
But sitting where you're sitting, I think that those words carry gravity. So, and this is kind of what I meant by a selfish interview is what I was curious about is like, if you're sitting at the end of that, not the end, but you know what I mean? Being able to look back on some achievements. I think that what you say as far as what you fear and you know, well, this might happen. It's kind of like when I was starting to gain momentum and gain interest in what I was doing. One of the things I heard all the time was like, oh, there's no money in that. And it's like, it's razor thin, bloody blah. And there's all these like little hyperbolic statements about how there's no money in RPGs and everything. But I kind of had the stance that you have, which is like, anything you do in life, if you just organically go with it, don't be a dick and actually do it because you love it, it'll work out. If you're carving balsa wood figurines on a beach in Fiji, if you do it for a few years, it'll work out. Like you'll find a place to sleep. You know, so it's good to hear.
As long as your expectations are reasonable and not insane, and you follow the path that you want to follow, whether that's doggedly making the thing obsessively perfect that no one else wants but you, then follow that. If it's seeing what's popular and bending your design work towards the thing that's going to make more money for you, do that. Just follow those impulses wherever they lead. It's go ahead. Ask me the next thing. That's a whole big tangent. That
it gets so heady and beautiful.
Yeah, it gets into like what it is to be an artist, and maybe that's a too big a topic for this.
It's probably too big. So I guess, I mean, it's great to pick your brain. I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
I know that I love that picture that you posted where it's like a freaking journal and a pen and a bottle of Soylent or something. I think that's a very interesting little glimpse into kind of like, I'm just trying to write, guys. I'm just trying to write another thing. I'm just trying to, I gotta, you know, it's Wednesday and I feel weird today.
Yep.
So I guess that would be sort of a good, I mean, what do we got? 10 minutes or so left. So I think a fun thing that I'm still curious about is sort of not necessarily just what's next, like, ooh, what's the next game you're going to make, but more so sort of where are you at? You know, was Blades satisfying? I know there's a little bit more in store with Blades. Are you kind of like, yeah, okay, I did the position effect thing and that's really cool, but I really miss my D8s or, you know, like where did you wind up creatively sort of sitting on that nice big pile of skulls, you know, like that. It's got to be a really good feeling. And I think it's well deserved. I think it's a really sweet book. And anyone watching, if you have the ducats, you should definitely throw them in the forge and get yourself a copy. Whether or not you're going to play Blades at your table like this weekend, I think is neither here nor there. But just as an exploration of a theme, as exploration of sort of taking one idea and going all the way down it, I think it's a really unique and cool book, the way that it verbally sort of identifies itself. And there's some neat things going on there. So fuck Thanks. Yeah, I did a cool thing.
Yeah.
Then what?
Well, it's like two-pronged now, because Blades, like Apocalypse World, it shares some DNA there, obviously. But one important part of that DNA is Vincent very intentionally, I put it a different way. Vincent knew, based on what he had made, that Apocalypse World was going to lead to people hacking and making their own stuff out of it. So he launched the game with the forums at the same time and told everyone, hey, this is how you hack Apocalypse World. It's in the book even.
Yeah.
And did it without Creative Commons, which is very interesting. He was just like, hey, this is all copyrighted, but just contact me and I'll give you permission if you need it. And that worked out fine for everybody. But he knew going into it that it was going to launch this thing. And so Vincent has this saying about game design that I love, which is part of your decision-making process as a designer is deciding what conversations you're going to have for the rest of your career.
Oh man.
You're going to put this in your game. Like, yeah, if you're Luke Crane and you want to have a conversation about the fight mechanics in Burning Wheel or Duel of Wits or whatever, putting that in your game is both, yeah, right? It's both a thing that serves the goals of your game and also a thing you have to talk about on the internet for all time.
Yeah.
So that's an important decision point when you're designing. It can be paralyzing. Try not to think about that too much, but
that's a big one.
But it is true. And so I knew with Blades it was going to be the same thing. Like we played about maybe half of the playtesting cycle for Blades was normal Blades in the Dark, and then the second half was this thing called Razors, which is the like near future South China Sea mercenaries thing.
Whoa.
And that everyone loved it, and we had a ton of fun playing that. And I was like, okay, yeah, you have a group of people with a crew sheet, you have like these action mechanics, you can make a lot of different stuff out of that. I see where that's going.
Yeah.
So I tried to make the Blades book serve two purposes. Like, hey, this is how you play Blades in the Dark, omitting a couple bits that the group has to kind of bring to the table themselves, which is a strange design aesthetic, but apparently it's working out okay. And also the hack space. So the Kickstarter has like 12 hacks or something that came out of that that are all being worked on in various stages.
Yeah.
And that was partially because people contacted me and were like, oh, I want to make something for this. And I was a bit naive and was like, sure, I'll throw that on the Kickstarter. Woo!
I'll promise more things.
Right. So I signed up for that conversation forever. Where is this person's playset that you don't control? Like, yeah, I have to talk about that, which is fine. But so now as a designer, I'm kind of in this parallel tracks where I have games that aren't Blades related that I want to work on and produce. I have this game Razors, which is sort of a Blades hack, I guess, that I want to produce. And then I also have this like community of designers that have come in to the fold with Blades that I want to mentor and shepherd out and push their boats out, you know?
Right.
So it's interesting.
How do you, I mean, this is probably not an easy thing to answer, but how do you navigate those options sort of day to day? Because this is something that I'm just like all over the place with, of like, I have 6 things to work on. They're all really cool, but how, you know, where is your heart leading you? Is your ADD leading you on to the next design, or is like, oh crap, there's more forum posts, I better answer those before I like leave the house for the day? Yeah,
there's like the chore aspect. Hate to put it that way, because I love doing the forum, but that's a daily thing. Like, okay, I get up, I make my coffee, Like I go and like delete all the spam accounts out of my G+ community.
Yep.
And I go through and I check the posts and see what's cool and like comment on stuff and answer questions where I need to. That's a daily thing that I just do. That's not really like a decision process so much. Then I try to, as much as possible, I'm in a weird space right now, but normally I try to let my gaming navigate that for me. So if my group is like, if we're going to start playing the new version of Thought Lords, then if we play a session and everyone's like, I don't know, then that game might kind of drift back onto the back burner. And if they're like, ooh, okay, then that's going to push me to keep going there. And when it's time to get ready for the Razor's Kickstarter or whatever we're doing with that, I don't know what yet, but that's going to be driven by play. I'm going to need a game group to play with. And if that starts to come together real quick and it starts to feel real sharp in play, then that'll drive me to focus there. So it's kind of, I still try to let my actual play process, play experiences as a GM or whatever, kind of drive my designer thing. Because you're probably the same way. Like I have 15 different things going in notebooks or as little notes or little ideas or something.
Yeah.
And that's good. Like, and I'm quoting Vincent all the time, but he said to me once, it's not your job to design games. It's your job to fill notebooks.
Amen to that.
And I think that's true. It's a good way to look at it. Because you just are flooded with ideas. And if you try to chase them all down, it's going to just drive you crazy. So I think it's good.
It's good. And it may not be obvious to all people who haven't lived in the sort of creative lifestyle for a long time. But I think, just what you're describing is that fundamental like endorphin chase, and when that endorphin pops, like when you see that sort of that smile or that shock on that player's face, or you feel that moment where it got crispy and someone, oh shit, that just no. But then on the other side, if it's sort of milky and flat, you wind up not even working on it for 2 weeks. It's not because it's a bad project. It's just because you don't have the, the tickles.
Yeah.
And just being able to be sensitive to those tickles. I think for some people who are newer to creative sort of habits, I think it's great advice. It's just like, don't fight if you're excited about something because you're supposed to do this other thing. At least if you have the luxury, just go with it.
Let the projects be whatever they are, and that's easier said than done. But I think I've seen people get frustrated because they think every idea they have should be carried to completion or isn't going to be real until it's a book or whatever. And I feel like it's just so much better to, again, this is just my temperament. I don't know if this is applicable to a lot of people, but it works well for me to have a lot of irons in the fire, lots of little notions. I have a board game that, I was talking to someone at PAX about this, and he's a board game designer, and he got really excited. He was like, "Oh, I want to talk to you about your board game. Like, that's so cool. Is it co-op?" I'm like,
"Boards in the dark."
I'm like, "It might be co-op." He's like, "Cool. Like, I love co-op stuff. We should talk about co-op stuff." And I felt kind of bad because I was like, "Well, I mean, I don't even know if I'm going to ever work on that again. Like, there's not much to talk about, really. Like, it's kind of a fun little notion, but."
I drew an island on a piece of notebook paper, and we called it Escape from Notebook Island. That doesn't mean I'm going to publish Escape from Notebook Island, but it was very fun.
Yeah, and I appreciate that level of enthusiasm because it's infectious and it's great when someone's excited about your work. But for my process, I have to have all kinds of little nascent designs that may never turn into anything, and then
me too, or I go
someday
crazy.
One of those will strike. And most of the time, like 99% of the time, it's because of play. We play it and we go, oh yeah, there's something to this, and we keep going and we keep going and we keep going.
Have you gotten a lot out of, I mean, you mentioned sort of a con bump into, have you got a lot out of con life?
Yeah, it kind of hand in hand with that group of friends thing. Where being friends on the internet was one thing, but then back then it was Gen Con, where we could all show up in one place and have a purely social interaction where we weren't just like talking about intense game theory stuff through our keyboards. We were hanging out, drinking whiskey together, and like having that part of our friendship. So for me, cons typically have been that, and less about like seeing the new cool game or whatever. It's more about all these disparate people coming together in the same place and socializing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really everything at Gen Con is a blast.
Yeah,
but
it's hard to pick.
I really had fun just doing what we could do anywhere, which was like, you know, basically standing on the porch drinking beer, which we could do that absolutely anywhere. You don't have to be at Gen Con, but it was just a fire for us to gather around was Gen Con. But standing around just arguing about absolutely freaking nothing was a blast.
Yeah, totally. There's no substitute, and we shouldn't surprise us as gamers, right? Our hobby is essentially getting together with our friends and talking about stuff. So that, you know, you get to be good at that. I think the longer you're a gamer, the more you are comfortable with social stuff. Like we have there's a stigma in gaming that like, oh, you're like antisocial nerds and you're weirdos and stuff. I don't think that's true. I think Adam said this the other day. Like he goes off and does a talk. I don't know where, like at Google or something. I don't think he's done that, but for example, and people are like, how do you do that? Like, isn't that intimidating? How do you give a talk like that? And he's like, oh, I just GM it. I just GM the thing. Like I pretend like I'm the GM of the talk and I run the thing. I've done that a million times. Yeah,
it's like hanging out at 7-Eleven playing Street Fighter.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, people that play Street Fighter are also perceived generally as like weird antisocial people. But in my day, if you wanted to kick it, like, you know, down at the UMC or something and play Street Fighter, that means you are totally groovy with randos walking up and kind of having some sort of pretend beef.
Yeah.
And then throwing down on the beef and totally being groovy with it. It's not like some kind of real, you know, conflict or anything. And that was a big way that we kind of got into sort of the meeting gamers problem, you know.
Exactly. And it forges friendships through that process. And that's the meat of what we're about, I think. In anyone who's listening to this and wants to do this, yeah, I think we've hit those points. It's about play your games, play other people's games, offer to play test other people's games. That's a great way to get involved, and let that play experience drive you. It's so maddening as a designer, and people ask me this on Twitter. I get this not every day, but every week probably. Someone saying, I'm stuck in this thing in my design. I don't know what to do, and they like send it to me. Like, should this be 4 or 6? You know, like what's the thing? And I'm like, you got to play. Like, what did your game group say? And they're like, I don't have a game group. Like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm always just like, if you don't have a game group, how can you be a game designer? Like, it's like saying, I want to design, I'm designing a PS4 game, but I don't have a PS4. Like you need to have that. You need to have the platform for you.
And those aren't interchangeable. If you don't have a game group and you do have a PS4, that's not, that diagram is not
a substitute. No. And I assume, I don't know, but I assume you've had a similar experience with your own designs. Like,
oh, definitely. And with, you know, in my own way, helping people with their campaigns and with their story writing and stuff like that. You know, it's I just think for a lot of people, it's not easy to just sort of take your pants off and walk down the street, which is a lot like what this is doing. You know, it's very just no hard feelings in any direction. I'm doing my best. It's a parade, motherfucker. It's a parade, like, and it's a one-man parade. And like, hey, oh, you're down. All right, get in the parade. Let's do this. And I think to some people that's a little bit new, but the more that we preach it on the mountain, the more it can happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, John, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. And we've had 100 crazy people hanging out this whole time, so that's awesome. And this guy will archive right up on YouTube channel. And we'll, you know, push all the buttons to make it reach as many people as we can. And I'm just excited because I've never done any kind of interviewing thing.
It was great. I mean, you GM the hell out of this. So good.
I got to say, though, you know, and I'm not really just trying to plug John's book either. Like, something about reading Blades was a lot like reading Dungeon World. And I know that you guys share some design DNA there. Yeah. But I think that's an important thing to say right up front, which is like Dungeon World basically sort of blew my mind in a way because it reminded me of my roots of hacking GURPS and stuff. And it just reminded me of like, look away from all the big and look at the small for a second. And bring it back down. And to me, Blades did the same thing. And it did it in such a way that for whatever weird reason, I was just like, I see this guy's name on this book here. I have no idea who this guy is. I'm just going to email this guy and what the hell? So I think that's almost, we've echoed it several times, and it's a beautiful boomerang to throw out in the world and to come whirling back. It's just reach out to people that you're excited about what they're doing. Just don't look for some kind of outcome. It's just like I said, take off your pants and walk down the street and call it a parade. And before you know it, people will be behind you with like flamingos and stuff.
That's right. That's right. This is a beautiful case study for that. This is exactly how this happened. And look, now we're buddies, and we've had this great experience, and it works. we just proved it right now.
Amen. So we'll be sharing a whiskey in the near future. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll archive this bugger, and the conversation will continue. And I may even be working on my own hack in the dark. So John, once again, thanks, man. Strength, honor, and in your case, whiskey.
Yes.
And thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.